Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Geek Gourmet, and we have actively avoided, knowingly avoided talking about Star Wars on this podcast because, let's face it, there are some issues that we all have with Star Wars and the most recent sequel trilogy in celebration of The Mandalorian coming out the Friday that this podcast is getting released. So on the 26th of October is the day this is supposed to be coming out. We wanted to talk about Star Wars and maybe talk about The Mandalorian a little bit, but more so talk about the sequel trilogy. So boom. I know you've mentioned it briefly, but
yes,
how do you feel about all in all the sequel trilogy, the Star Wars sequel trilogy?
C minus.
C minus. I actually
Barely passing.
See, that's the thing, right? I feel like a lot of people hate it, and I think it's okay to dislike it.
Now, do I hate it? Yes. Do I see the value in it? Kind of.
Yeah.
Do I understand that there were issues behind the scenes that then made the movies as controversial as they are? Yes. However, none of that is an excuse, and it's all Disney's fault, and I hate them for it. However, I will also say that it has better production value than the prequels, for obvious reasons.
Well, right.
However,
right.
And like the sequel trilogy started off plenty strong, right? Like I enjoy The Force Awakens.
I do too, actually.
If they had ended it after Force Awakens, I would have preferred that than them continuing and giving us what they gave us. I would have rather lived in a world where it just kind of stopped and we could just think about it. I would rather imagine what these movies, I guess, could have been versus than what we have. Because there's so much lost potential that started in The Force Awakens that either died or disappeared by the time of the second movie.
Right. No, I think that, and I'm going to jump on this Force Awakens conversation, and why don't we talk about The Force Awakens first? I do have some issues with it, aside from the rest of the trilogy, right? And I think The Force Awakens was a very safe movie to make because it followed the same...
It was pretty much beat for beat.
Right, as A New Hope.
Yeah.
As A New Hope. It really was. And that's why I said that it was a very safe movie to make because, I mean, it really was. Like you said, it followed beat for beat. And here's the thing. I know there has been a lot of hate to the prequels, right, in past years and leading up to the new sequel trilogy. But I think why the disappointment for the sequel trilogy is that much greater than the prequel trilogy is that
prequels have memes.
No, they do. And
mostly it.
Well, I think that the reason, and maybe I'm only speaking for myself, right,
okay,
in this situation. But the prequel trilogy doesn't disappoint me as much because Revenge of the Sith was amazing. I think that was
fire.
Aside from the memes,
yeah, memes
even
aside,
including the memes, it was a great movie.
It's a solid B. I enjoyed it.
Oh, I think it's a B+, but yeah, no, absolutely. It was honestly one of the best, most recent Star Wars movies in the last, 15 years.
It also helps that it sets up Darth Vader, and that's what we were looking forward to in those prequel movies.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And see, yes, they were disappointing in their own ways, but we also knew what was happening at the end of that story. There was no more story to tell.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of what ifs. There wasn't a lot of what ifs. It was more, we now need to just fill in the blanks because we started.
We need to know how we got from point A.
Started from a fixed point, and we have a fixed end. So we just fill it in.
Because we know that Anakin Skywalker is, in fact, Darth Vader, and like you were saying, right? We started at point A. We actually, in the 70s, started at point C, but we're starting from point A to get to point C.
Yeah.
And obviously, the sequel trilogy gets you to point E. I think that's why, for me at least, they were less disappointing, because we knew where we were going to end, right? And not only that, but the ending of the prequel trilogy, I think, makes up for a lot of the other stuff that happened in there. But with that
there's
being
also
said,
a lot of charm to the prequel.
I was gonna say there really is,
for whatever it is that just makes it so memeable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, I mean, Darth Maul is iconic.
Well, I think his fight with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan
is
really. I mean, say what you will about the Phantom Menace, but I think that their fight was super meaningful, and the whole time,
No, yeah.
you know, even getting older and watching the movie, and even as a kid, I feel like it had so much weight.
No, for
because
sure.
holy shit, the Sith are back, right? Where have they been this whole time, right? They've been gone forever. Holy shit.
And I don't
Now
think
all of a sudden,
I don't think we knew during the original trilogy that the Sith had just suddenly come back after a long 1,000 or so year hiatus.
right. So that's what, like, I mean, like you were saying, right? That's what makes it so.
Yeah, because that fight matters because it's kind of, I guess, the fight for Anakin's like future initially.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's also that first fight between a user of the light side of the Force and a user between the dark side of the Force for the first time in 1,000 years.
Experienced.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
not
yeah.
only that, but an experienced user of the light and dark. Because let's face it, in the original trilogy, we did get Luke fight Darth Vader, obviously. But, I mean, Luke was in no way as powerful as maybe Qui-Gon was, who was a master, right? We didn't get to see that kind of dynamic. Yeah. The books are a whole different story, and I actually kind of want to talk about the books a little bit.
The books are kind of insane. In a good way, not in a bad way.
In a very good way. No. Yeah, they're awesome. But yeah, no. I definitely think that not only did that fight, also, it was like fighting for Anakin's future, but his immediate future, but also his, like, prolonged future, right? Like, I feel like there was those two angles. So we thought it would either be Qui-Gon beating and winning, you know, the fight ultimately, winning the fight for Anakin's future, or it would be Darth Maul winning and then making him Darth Vader, which we didn't know which way it would go because we have been told at this point that he was a Jedi turned bad, right? And it could have gone either way. I mean, we really didn't know. But ultimately, obviously, neither won. Obi-Wan is the one who ended up coming out of there alive and beating Darth Maul. But it raises the question of, and I like to really think about this question sometimes, of if Qui-Gon had been the one to win and to raise Anakin, would he have become Darth Vader?
Probably not.
Right? Like, right, and that's how I feel about it. A lot, and that's what the prequels do, right? They raise all these questions that we have and create these conversations within the universe, which I think if you can get your viewers talking about theorizing and having these conversations, that is exactly what you want out of a movie. That is exactly what you want out of a series.
Because at least with the prequels, because of my previous investment in the original trilogy, I was then able to remain invested in the overall story because they were directly connected. With the sequels, the original trilogy and the prequels are pretty much cut dry. Those are done. That's a done story.
Right.
The Force Awakens is pretty much the start of a new story, just involving some older characters.
To me, it almost feels like you said, right? It's a different, whole other story, not connected at all. So that's why when Palpatine came back, that kind of came out of left field. Although it makes sense, it came out of left field. It almost felt like it to me. And if I may talk about that, it almost feels like J.J. Abrams and company were trying to fix what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi.
And I will never understand what possessed Disney to let 3 different directors work on 3 different movies connected. How did they come to that conclusion that would have been for the best? How is that possible?
You know, I don't know.
Like, how often does that work out? How often does making a first movie, having the director walk out on the sequel, replacing them, work out? And I don't know. I couldn't count any off the top of my head.
Well, I also can't, to their credit, not that's a lot of credit, but to their credit, I also can't count how many have tried to do that. Maybe because it's not a good idea, and I agree with you. It's not a good idea, but maybe they were just trying something new. And if that's what they were doing, I applaud them. Or maybe they were just trying to save some money. Right? Like, who knows what possessed them to make that what did you say? That decision. Yeah. But it was definitely a weird decision. And Rian Johnson, while I think Knives Out was great, I think some of the...
He's a very particular director. And this was not the project to have him do. If he were working with 5 or 6 characters, it would have been fine. He was working with a living, breathing, shifting universe.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I understand what you're saying about Rian Johnson, but let me piggyback off that real quick. So I think that had he worked on a Rogue One-esque kind of story, he would have done fantastic.
No, yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying, right? So what I
Right.
what I
Oh, okay.
meant
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
if he worked with a much smaller cast, it would have been fine. The problem is that he was working with multiple worlds in multiple settings. There's like 2 different tone shifts throughout the movie. There's like 3 different problems happening concurrently, and I think it was just too much. Where if you were doing a small group doing one thing, bouncing from like planet to planet, it would have been fine with like a singular ultimate goal. Because Rogue One was good because the characters were good.
And let's talk about Rogue One for a second. Because we keep bringing up Rogue One, and I would actually like to clarify how we feel about Rogue One. And I think, and I think Rogue One might just be the best Star Wars movie to come out of this whole thing, to come out of the sequel-esque
Disney movies.
movies, the Disney movies. I think it's the best one, for multiple reasons. I think that you're so invested in a story that you didn't know happened, right? It has that charm to it. It has again, like the prequels, we know where we're starting, we know where we're ending, what happened in the middle there, right? Because there's no way that it ends in a very good way, right? There's no way that we see our Diego Luna and what's her name? The actress who plays the main character.
Oof.
Jin. I forgot her name. Felicity
Jones?
Yes.
Felicity
that's
Jones.
a yes with a question mark. That's the yes with
I'm going to commit to that. If it's wrong, it is wrong.
Would we have loved to see them get together? I think that would have been nice, right? But obviously, there was so much more at stake there that obviously that wasn't going to happen. And from an artistic standpoint, there's a lot of well-designed, articulated moments, especially with that Darth Vader hallway scene.
Oh,
I mean, that
God.
That was so good. I mean, that was straight out of the books or like a comic book. Like that looked fantastic.
Yeah. It felt like I was reading some of the Darth Vader comics that
where he does some crazy shit.
Marvel's been
producing it.
Yeah, they've been releasing the Darth Vader comics, and those Darth Vader comics are no joke. Those are fire. Do not be sleeping on the Darth Vader comics.
No, he fights like a T-Rex. Like he does crazy shit, man. And I agree with you. I think they're fantastic, and that's why I said, right, like these. That scene in particular is so beautifully crafted and articulated. Like it's almost like Thanos rolling up to Wakanda, right? Like it holds so much weight to it that at this moment in time there is no Jedi, right? We don't know of any Jedi.
Well, there are Jedi, but they're either younglings that never became full-fledged Jedi, or they're old Jedi that went into hiding.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Like what I'm trying to say is that there's no help.
Yeah, there was no help.
Yeah, there's no help for them. Luke wasn't established yet. Obi-Wan was watching over Luke like a weirdo
and hiding his identity.
Yeah, for good reason, of course, for good reason. Don't get me wrong. What I'm trying to say is that scene holds so much weight because no one was helping them. Like this was a fight to the finish. Like they were racing to get that, and people were throwing themselves at him because they were like, "Well, we got to get these plans. Like we have to win, right?"
Oh yeah, because it ends up being a very all or nothing gambit.
Right, and they stake all of their lives on these plans, right? And it leads straight into A New Hope. And I think that Rogue One has to be the best Disney Star Wars movie that has come out. And with that being said, it's hard. It's kind of sad that is the best one. It's not one of the trilogy movies, right? And so let's come back.
I think so.
I mean, I think it's sad, and I think it's great, right? Because then there's a lot of credit. There's the potential, right? There's the potential to have all these movies well crafted in that same way. But I think, like you said, there is a lot of creative miscommunication between...
Yeah, just nobody was talking.
The execs and all the directors. Like, if you're going to do different directors, and we'll pop back into The Last Jedi here in a second. If you're gonna bring in a bunch of 3 different directors and maybe sit them down and have conversations, right, about these things. And I don't know if they did, right? I'm not in that. I'm not in there behind closed doors. It'd be kind of cool if I was, because then I can give a better insight into this. But right, like that just seems like what you'd have to do, and not only them, but also the
thing.
Right, but not only them. I think it's important to also have the Rogue One director, right, or to also have the Han Solo director into that mix, and even Jon Favreau, who's orchestrating all of the Mandalorian, because then conversations are being had between everyone, right? Between everyone. And obviously there was conversations between Jon Favreau and the Disney execs, because then we saw the whole Force healing thing that we see in the last movie, which makes no sense as to why it came out of nowhere, but we'll talk about that when we talk about it. So, like, back into the Rian Johnson Last Jedi thing. So I think that from an artistic standpoint, I think he nailed a lot of things in that movie specifically. Mm-hmm. I think that there was that awesome scene where they go into hyperspace and they split that ship in half. You know, there was the weight of the moment.
Yeah, which is just kind of not the way that jumps work at all.
No.
In any, he just wanted it to look cool.
And it looked cool. Did. To his credit, it did.
But I don't give a shit, and I hated it. Because what's the point of making a cool moment if it contradicts kind of the world it's in? Like if James Bond suddenly started using magic, you'd be too thrown off to like notice how cool it is. You'd be so put off by it because it's just not the way things work. In Star Wars, when you do a jump like that with the warp drives, you make a wormhole and you go in, right, and you pop out the other side. It's why pilots in Star Wars don't have the reaction speed of like hyper light plus by not colliding through asteroid belts and planets and stars.
Right, because they have the technology to help them do that.
Otherwise, what was the point? And when I saw that, I knew that Rian Johnson at no point decided to do any kind of homework and didn't have anyone advising him on this. Because there's no way that anyone who's seen even at least like the 6 core movies that were out before The Force Awakens could tell you there's no way in hell that worked. There's no way that should have worked, because it doesn't. It's like telling me all of a sudden a Ford Raptor is about to flip in its tires and turn on jet boosters and fly.
Right, that's not how that works. Not yet, at least. Maybe one day we'll have a flying Raptor. We're working on it. No, I think that you're right. I think that if there's an established universe that we have, there are certain rules and there are certain practices that we're all used to, then keep them, right? Work within those limitations.
And it's fine to add stuff, right?
Oh, like absolutely.
With what are they called? The sisters, the Night Sisters or something? They straight up use magic through the dark side of the Force. They're not Force users, they're magic users. And that's an addition. It doesn't take away and it doesn't contradict anything. That's just a new thing.
Nope. Yeah, because they've never said, magic does not exist. Yeah, they've never said that.
Same way, God, I'm trying to think of... Or I guess in Solo, how we learn kind of that like backstory of Han picking up the Millennium Falcon. We didn't know the entire story. We just knew that it wasn't originally his.
No, it wasn't.
When they told that story in Solo, it didn't contradict anything.
And then the whole 12 parsec thing, like Kessel Run thing.
Yeah,
that was a little thing we had heard back in the day.
Midichlorians is kind of in the gray
out there. Yeah,
does it explain the Force? Sure. Does it contradict like the spirituality vibe that they were going for in the original trilogy? Maybe. Midichlorians is kind of a thing that I guess they threw in for like a solid explanation of the powers rather than.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely.
Boom, this is the way it is now. I feel like it was an attempted addition, but it felt a lot like a contradiction. So I see why people dislike midichlorians, but I'm not like one way or the other about them.
I don't really care. I agree. I don't really care. Although I liked the idea of it just being like a spiritual thing, like not really having an explanation. I think that you have to leave something to the imagination of the viewers, right? So that, like I said earlier, we can have these conversations and be like, what is going on here? Like, what do you think about this? You know, and that's what gets people to kind of talk. But anyways, that's the prequels, right? And for other reasons, the prequels are weird and feel off.
Episode
and, you
2.
know, whatever.
Episode 2 was peak prequels.
Attack of the
and it
Clones
was
was
so
pretty out there,
bad.
man.
I
It
think
was the whole sand monologue.
I hate sand.
I hate
It's
sand.
rough and it's coarse and it gets everywhere. Like those are the
Oh, dude, that's
important
my
topics.
favorite.
Those are the things that we wanted the chosen one to be talking about. The movie doesn't get good until Django shows up at the end.
Well, yeah, and then there's the whole Count Dooku
There's
fight, or Darth Tyrannus, excuse me, Tyrannus Rex.
I mean, aside from us learning about the clones and the Genossians, why did we need to meet Obi-Wan's like diner friend who was like an old spice runner? Was it like Dex?
Right.
Did we need an entire like 10-minute, 15-minute? I think it was like a 10-minute scene of like them catching up and like talking about Genossians and clones and stuff.
Yeah, I know. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, he needs to get some information, but yeah, maybe it didn't need to be that long. But I agree with you. The Clone Wars was peak prequel.
And just this random side character that was just there for that, when I feel like he could have just learned all of that by going to like the Jedi Temple archives and then finding stuff out there instead of all of it just being not there.
Right. Well, you know, jumping back into The Last Jedi, because I think that The Last Jedi, I'm saying that correctly, right? Yeah, The Last Jedi. I keep saying, in my brain, I want to say Return of the Jedi, because that's like my favorite one out of the original prequels. I mean, original trilogy. No, but yes, back to, because I think you're right, but I think the second movies in each sequel prequel trilogy happen to be the worst ones. So making that connection is super important, because then maybe we can get an insight as to how their climax of the movie of the trilogy kind of fell so hard. Right?
Oh yeah,
because
man,
yeah,
I think that the movie was doing a pretty good job, like especially towards the beginning of plugging all of the holes that Rian Johnson made.
You're talking about the third one?
Oh yeah.
Rise of Skywalker. Yeah.
In Rise of Skywalker. But I also think that it didn't do enough, not to like discredit it at all. I'm glad that they like addressed the things that they did, but I also think that the damage from The Last Jedi was too much for them to have even like begun to unravel and fix.
So I wanna put in my 2 cents here about The Last Jedi real quick before we move on and talk about Rise of Skywalker. The Last Jedi, I think it has some great moments, right? I think
it has great moments.
And I said this.
I agree.
Well, I think on the stream maybe once or twice I've said that before. I think that it has great moments. I think that, you know, the whole killing Snoke came out of left field. I think that was a very interesting choice. Obviously later on we find out who he really is and yada yada yada. But that aside, I think that was a very interesting choice. There we start to see the downfall of Ben Solo, or of Kylo Ren right, at the time. We kind of start to see glimpses of that. We start to see glimpses of Rey's power, right? So I think that in all those aspects, there were great moments, crafted moments, designed moments that were really awesome, and I would have loved to see incorporated more efficiently, because it felt like at times things were kind of just thrown in there. Like you said, it was very jarring. Although that scene with the spaceship in hyperspace looked cool,
didn't make any sense.
It kind of happened. It kind of just happened, and like it was cool. But then, like, what was the meaning, right?
Yeah.
Why did it not play within the laws of these established laws within the
Rise of Skywalker? Speaking of that moment specifically, really fast, they then in the beginning cut down the moment even further by saying, yeah, that was like a 1 in a million thing. Let's not ever do that again.
And like you said, that was that.
And then it takes me back to
J.J. Abrams.
Then what was the point of having any of this?
Right. Because that is a crazy chance of that even working. And if not, they would have all been dead and she would have been safe, right? Because then that kind of takes away the, I guess, the heroics of it. That makes you think, well, she assumed she'd just get away safely, right?
She knew that she was gonna die, but I don't think she knew what was gonna happen, because the way that they explain like the feat itself in Rise of Skywalker is that it was completely luck based. she happened to slam into like their engines or something.
I understand. I understand.
When she could have very well just gone through like a side piece on the edge of it, hit nothing important, and still blown up.
Right. Okay, no, I get you. I understand now. Yeah, and in addition to that, one of the biggest things that The Last Jedi bothers me a lot, and this is because, and I said I was going to bring up the books, here's me bringing up the books.
Nice.
I've read a lot of the sequel books. I have 14 Star Wars books here in my room as we speak. I have 5 or 6 of them that are before the prequel trilogy. I have like 8 that are after the original trilogy. I just don't feel like Luke Skywalker would have up and tried to kill
Absolutely
his apprentice.
Not in a million.
Just no way.
He's pretty much not the same character by the time of The Last Jedi. He's the same character as recently as The Force Awakens.
But in that like
20-second break in storytelling between the end of The Force Awakens and the beginning of The Last Jedi is suddenly a different character.
Not only that, but for Luke to up and leave everyone stranded in the midst of what seems to be a civil war again.
Yeah.
Right? Makes zero sense. Zero sense.
It also doesn't make sense to me that, and I've mentioned this a lot because it boils my blood.
Yeah.
Why would Luke Skywalker, whose father was a genocidal maniac for at least 20 years, and then was trying his hardest to make him come back to the light and denounce and leave the Empire?
Yeah.
And like saw
he got
the
him
good
to do,
in
by the
him.
way.
Yeah, by the end he did. That same guy would not have a bad dream and have bad vibes about his nephew, the daughter of his sister, who went on the same journey he did, and try and strike him down in his sleep.
Yeah. You very well said.
He was like fully trained. He was like in the middle of training him. How many times did Luke himself have issues in the middle of his training? His training didn't really get off of the ground until he went and found Yoda.
Well, not only that, but let's also remember that when he was in Dagobah, he also had visions of himself as Darth Vader, right? He had this dark potential just as his father did, except his father gave into them, right? Luke did not give into them. That's the main difference.
And then we get one of the best lines of all time. Like my father before me, I am a Jedi.
To your point, I agree. There's just no way that this Luke that we know and love would have gone in there because the vibes were off. He wasn't vibing. Yeah. And he tried to kill. And also, let's also be real here. Think, mindset aside, Luke is leaps and bounds and years ahead of Ben Solo in terms of power,
experience,
mental fortitude, experience,
force.
There is just
ability.
no way. There is just no way that Ben Solo's raw power scared him that much. In the books, and I hate to be that person, but I'm gonna be that fucking person. In the books, Luke is literally a god. Luke is literally a god.
Rise of Skywalker, Kylo isn't even as strong as Rey. He gets clapped by Rey.
No, he's not. No, he does. And that's
by tapping into the dark side of the Force with the most negative of emotions, which empowers the dark side of the Force and still loses pretty convincingly. So what was the issue? Well, I know what the issue is now that I'm like saying that. The issue was Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson was the issue. Because Rian Johnson has stated this multiple times that he was, for The Last Jedi, he was trying to do things that would surprise people. He wanted just a bunch of gotcha moments. They wanted to flip the tables every time there was a table to be flipped.
And let me just say this too. If Luke turned the way he did, I don't know that I necessarily hate where he got to. I hate that it was out of left field and there was no explanation.
Yeah, their explanation for it was, yeah, I nearly tried to kill my nephew, so I went into hiding. My bad, guys.
Right.
That's it?
It wasn't like there was a big war and Luke lost Leia,
Yeah.
right? So therefore he was freaking out.
He didn't kill anyone. He tried to, and it scared him that he tried to, but he didn't kill anyone. If anything, him leaving is what drove Ben Solo to become Kylo Ren, because he felt abandoned. And I think that, and when I talk about this movie to other people, and sometimes they'll say, well, this is like the natural progression for his character. He's been through a lot, and he just doesn't want to do anything anymore. That doesn't sound like Luke at all. Y'all did not see the same movies at me. What are you talking about?
No. And that's what I'm saying. It hurts a little more for those of us who read the books.
And Luke's not a saint, right? He's not a perfect character.
By no means. By no means.
100% altruism. He's not Superman. He has his issues. But he wanted to refound the Jedi Temple. He wanted to make a new Jedi Temple because he was, for his time, the last Jedi. He wanted to bring back the light. But the second that he saw a glimmer of dark in his nephew, he said, nah, that's not for me. I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. Someone else do that. And then leading the universe back into dark. Because when he left, Kylo went to the dark side and then was left unchecked, building up the strength of the First Order, causing all of the problems.
So, for me at least, Luke's turn of events, right? Luke's this new character, basically, it almost feels like, is my biggest issue with The Last Jedi, is how it all happened and that explanation, right? And just kind of hearing, because this is a Luke movie, right? The Force Awakens was a Han Solo movie. This is a Luke movie. He basically did things in a way that weren't very ideal for his character. There was no progression to how it happened. And I also was hoping to see, with all of this build up to, I guess, them disliking each other, right? And finally meeting after years and years and years to be this epic battle, right? This epic fight sequence between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker. And guess what didn't happen? That. It was very anticlimactic. He sent a projection image of himself to go and toy with Kylo Ren. Which, see, okay, I realize you don't need to have cool action sequences for there to be a good movie. I get that. I'm there. But give us something. Something for all of these emotions.
And that's another
to come
problem.
And boil down
something
to.
Else that ties to that is, please give us something. And they gave us a lot of nothing. Remember what we were talking about when The Force Awakens dropped? Hey, yo, who's Rey's parents? Because that was a core part of her character. Who dropped her off at Jakku and left?
Right.
And so we're talking about that.
And we got none of that.
And then when we get to the next movie, we're like, oh, is she a Skywalker? Is she a Kenobi? Is she XYZ related person? And then she kind of like sees through that, I don't know, like that pool of like dark force something. And she's like retrospecting and like trying to see who her parents were through it. And she basically gets the answer out of that. No, nah, there's nothing there. My parents weren't shit. They were just people and I got left.
And because we saw The Force Awakens mirror A New Hope, I thought that we were going to get, in The Last Jedi, a merit of Empire and find out who her parents were like we did with Luke, right? Like how we did with Vader being like, I am your father, or I'm your father, right? I am, the iconic moment. So I thought maybe we would get something similar to that because they had seemed to be marrying them. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? It had kind of seemed that way from the first movie, and we got none of that. You're absolutely right. We got nothing. There was no bones thrown at us. There was no story progression.
And while not every major character has to be related to another major character, the problem is that they set it up in The Force Awakens.
No, they did. They made like you said, made it a core element
of like her character was the mystery of who are her parents. So then, where's the payoff in saying nope, her parents weren't that cool at all? They just kind of left her there. How am I supposed to get excited about that? How am I supposed to think deeper on that? Why do I care who her parents were if they didn't mean anything at all to anyone, even though you hyped it up for us? Why are we in the wrong to be disappointed and mad when you pull that crap?
And so let's transition into talking about Rise of Skywalker in the conversation of finding out who her parents are, right? So I think the Rise of Skywalker is a lot of what you said. I think it's a lot of J.J. Abrams trying to pick up the pieces that Rian Johnson left. Now, Rise of Skywalker is a decent enough movie, right? I give it a B-, right? Because maybe a C+. Actually, let me tell you that. Like, if it's a B-, it's a flat 80, right?
Yeah,
but
like
I would say it right. I would even say that it's maybe even like a 76, between a 76 and a 78, if we're giving it a grading scale. Because in J.J. Abrams' defense, he had a lot of pieces to pick up in the overall story. Was Return of the Jedi, or sorry, excuse me, was the last Jedi a decent enough movie on its own?
Absolutely not.
Maybe if you take out the whole
you have to skip
animal cruelty
of the movie to make it passable.
Las Vegas planet thing. Maybe if you just exclude that.
I want to talk about the casino planet.
Well, hold on. Maybe if you take out that whole sequence, it's a passable movie. But continue. Talk about that real quick.
The casino planet is everything that was wrong with the sequel trilogy.
And that's the pin on that, ladies and gentlemen. I agree.
The problem with the casino planet was, one, it didn't really matter. Nope. They went there to find Hacker Man. They could have gone anywhere for that. They could have written Hacker Man to be wherever. Hacker Man could have been on any other planet in any other situation.
Absolutely.
And so they go to this planet and they see like the horses in the stable, and they're naturally drawn to, oh my god, we have to free these poor creatures.
Yeah, of course.
And so they free them, and then they leave with Hacker Man, not getting them away from the actual city. When they fly away, the horse creatures get stopped at like the nearest cliff, only to end up probably being recaptured because they're literally just outside the city wall. So what was the point in that? And I guess showing us the child slaves that are supposed to be important at some point because we found out that they're like force sensitive or something. Like there were so many parts of it that could have been somewhere else in the movie, but we had to have that for some reason.
And that was definitely a weird situation, right? And I don't necessarily enjoy the Finn and whatever her name is, Rose's love thing that had going on.
No, it was forced. Oh my god, like, Finn trying to... Oh my god, the end. When Finn tries to sacrifice himself, and then Rose says, no, stop that. People care about you. So then she tries to sacrifice herself, going back on what she said and being a hypocrite.
Bro, I was like,
so mad.
I was like,
why are you talking?
I was like, just do it, bro.
Why are you talking about stuff when you yourself don't even believe in it?
And so, again, here's J.J. Abrams and The Rise of Skywalker picking up some, picking up the pieces. He didn't give her a bigger role in this movie.
She got pushed to the side even further.
Because I think of all the pushback that had because of her. And it's not even her as an actress. It's not even her as a person, right? Like,
no, none of that was the actress's fault.
The character. All of it had to do with the writing. All of it had to do with the execution of her character. And unfortunately, she had to be pushed aside, or else the movie would not have worked as well as it did. Now, Given
because
that
suddenly you have to account
it-
for a brand new character you hadn't planned on. And it doesn't help that there was already a bad taste in everyone's mouth from the last movie.
Right. And so this movie, Rise of Skywalker, is better than the previous one, but there's a lot of things that had to be fixed. And now they're tasked with finding these what are they called? These wayfinders, right? I think it's fine. I think it's a neat idea. I think it's okay. The only thing that what I wonder is why they didn't just put Palpatine earlier in the trilogy. Because him being only in the last movie provided zero to no excitement for me. Putting Palpatine there that late in the series did not seem like a very smart choice, because there felt like there was no build up, right? He kind of just hopped in because we were all wondering who Snoke was. Why is Snoke important? Why haven't we seen Snoke before? All these questions. Boom, Kylo kills him. Boom, all of a sudden Palpatine is here. Oh, guess what? I'm her grandfather. Okay.
No, yeah, and so what I heard
what's going
was
on?
that there was like conflicting reports from the lady that like leads the Star Wars division. I don't even remember her name at this point, but she was saying that they had planned on Palpatine being involved the whole time. JJ was saying that the Emperor was thrown in at the last minute.
That's how it felt.
Yeah, that's how it felt. Because if it was the Emperor, they would have told us a lot earlier. They probably would have told us at the end of Last Jedi. But the thing about it is that I think they threw in the Emperor because they needed people to come back. And what I think happened was that they had went online, like the writers, right? And they had seen a lot of fan theories. So then they just applied a lot of fan theories to what was going on. Because there was already talk about, since Force Awakens, people were talking about Snoke having a connection to the Emperor because they look kind of the same.
I mean, that might have been what it was, and I would definitely buy the fact that the Emperor was put in at the last second. I would definitely buy that because that's how it feels.
And the other thing that
feels not flushed out
is that we went from Rey has mysterious parents to Rey doesn't have mysterious parents to her parent is a clone. No, was the son of Palpatine. Is that correct, or was he the clone of Palpatine?
I think he was a son, if I remember correctly.
So she's the granddaughter of Palpatine all of a sudden. Why wouldn't
regardless of a clone or not?
Yeah, it would have been Palpatine. Yeah. It would have been a Palpatine blood. Why wouldn't she have gotten anything in The Last Jedi when inquiring about her lineage? Only one of the most powerful dark side users in the history of the Star Wars universe.
Right.
Nothing came back. So it was either a
some
fluke
sort of connection,
or that puddle was whack.
No, absolutely.
But it's more accurate to say that they needed to bring people back, so they included the Emperor because they knew that including the Emperor would bring everyone back, even though everyone was already still mad about The Last Jedi and let Solo bomb because of it.
And Solo was a good movie.
Solo was a good movie. It only did bad because no one went back to watch because of The Last Jedi. And I don't blame them.
No, Solo was
I don't blame them.
I don't think we needed Solo or wanted Solo, but I will say it was a decent movie, and if you have $3 or $4 and can rent it, I think it's worth the rent. Like, I think it was worth the $10 I paid to go see it.
It's also on Disney Plus.
It was a quality. It is now. But that aside, I do think it's worth the rent. Like, if you have to rent it, it's worth it. I think it was worth the ticket price when it came out. It was a decent enough movie that I enjoyed it a lot. And it's a real shame. But
it did suffer because of The Last Jedi. And Rise of Skywalker, they couldn't let happen.
Right. So, in addition to all that, I will say that the sequel trilogy is not the greatest thing to ever happen. I did not feel satisfied by the end of it. And here's my biggest takeaway from there's my biggest takeaway. It really was, man. There's some
massive letdown.
We needed to see some lightsaber action there, some dueling.
We needed to see the Jedi that we're talking to her, powering her up, fighting the Emperor, resurrected as Force ghosts behind her, helping her push instead of just voices.
Well, even the push makes no sense.
Because we know that as far back as Qui-Gon was doing Force research into manifesting as Force ghosts, and we had proof of it as early as Yoda. So Yoda, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, Kanan, and probably some other Force users that Qui-Gon could have taught in the afterlife after the fact would have been able to show up too.
Right. Well, while I agree with you, we also have to have some type of lightsaber duel at the end.
Correct.
Like, it can't just be a battle of...
I'm gonna push your lightning back.
Right, because that's not how that works.
And then it killed him? Why would an attack by the Emperor kill the Emperor? Like he was made of paper mache.
Logically speaking, it doesn't make sense, but what I need to see as a fanboy, and as someone who is here to not only see the story and the progression of these characters, but to also see the cool flashy moments. Because as kids, what caught our attention? The lightsaber fights. The cool lightsabers, the cool colors, the slashing, the burning, all these things. So I need some of that. That doesn't need to be a core element of the movie. Don't get me wrong.
And the original trilogy doesn't have the best choreography. It doesn't get better until later.
No, it does not.
However, those fights were still way better than anything that we got in the sequel trilogy, barring for Kylo and Rey fighting off the soldiers in front of Snoke towards the end of The Last Jedi.
Right. And then their fight was decent. It's not better
the Praetorian
than
Guard.
Duel of Fates.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Duel of the Fates is fire.
No, absolutely. And Empire, even that fight is way better than most of these fights, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just say that I feel like in order to feel satisfied, we needed to have more of a fight. We needed to have seen something like that. I mean, it's a huge letdown that there wasn't. But my biggest takeaway from this trilogy, and we can talk about yours as well, is Kylo Ren should have been the main character.
Oh, absolutely. Ben Solo was the best character in that whole thing.
Absolutely.
I never really cared about Rey post The Last Jedi.
And there was no reason for me to care about her because they didn't write it that way. They did not.
They just wrote her as I'm important.
They needed to have written her like that.
She wasn't likable.
You can get away with the first movie.
She wasn't charismatic.
They could have gotten away with it in the first movie, how they did it. But The Last Jedi should have been the movie where we finally get a look into her family, finally get to see who she is as a human being and as the next generation of Jedi Knights. But we got none of that.
She wasn't even like the part of the story that was like motivating it forward in The Last Jedi.
No.
It was like all Kylo. Kylo was driving the entire story in The Last Jedi.
Adam Driver was driving the entire story. I agree.
Because it's Kylo pursuing them on the ship. It's Kylo pursuing them on that salt planet. And it's Kylo that's living rent-free in Rey's head while she's training. And it's Kylo that screwed the rebels out of Hackerman. He was involved in all 3 or 4 parts of the movie.
Absolutely.
Rey was an afterthought, man. It felt like.
I think that they should have placed all their chips on Ben Solo, on his character. Because then we see the progression of the lineage. We see the progression of the rise of another Skywalker. Because although his name is Ben Solo, he is indeed a Skywalker.
And that's not to say, they shouldn't have been Rey because she is a female. Absolutely not. I love strong female leads. Y'all ever heard
Ahsoka?
of Ripley from Aliens? Y'all heard of
she's badass. Absolutely.
Korra?
Oh, I love Korra.
Have y'all heard of
Jin from the Rogue One? Like
literally the same. Ahsoka.
I think that while we did need
literally
a
every
lead,
movie that Mila Jovovich is in,
all the Resident Evils,
Underworld.
Well, I do think that we should have had I think having a strong female lead is a great option and a preferred option. I'm just taking the trilogy as it is, and in terms of how characters were written, Ben Solo in this how all of this was written should have been the main character. It would have been interesting to have a main character or the protagonist who was already a dark side user. That's how we came into this story.
And I love stories that have someone who's evil as the protagonist. I love stories like that.
No, I agree.
Because they don't because they don't follow the hero's journey.
while we could have foreshadowed the progression to him changing and being better, being on the good side, it's still, like you said, interesting and different because we don't ever see something.
It's a fresh
like
perspective.
That. Exactly. And that's my pin on that. I'm done complaining about these sequel trilogies for now. For now, we will probably talk about it again at some point. But I'm very excited for The Mandalorian Season 2. I think that Mandalorian has been one of the best titles to come out of the whole Disney Star Wars
the
franchise.
Best part about it.
Yeah. I've enjoyed it thus far. I expect Boom and I will be discussing The Mandalorian more as it comes out and talking about the cool scenes. We will definitely talk about the first episode. But let it be known, guys, that GG's having a bit of a revamp. We are, the next 2 weeks, going to release Demon Slayer conversations that Boom and I had about from the beginning to the end of the manga. There's going to be a 2-part episode. So, a 2-parter series. So, that's going to come out the first week of November. And then the second week. And then after that, Geek Gourmet is getting a bit of a revamp. We are transitioning into something a little different. And I hope y'all enjoy what we have coming thus far. We are very excited to morph and to continue to be better so that...
we're like a Pokemon.
You know. Exactly.
So
we evolve.
We start
get better.
as,
we get stronger.
The shit Magikarp, right? But then after we hit level 20, we're about to be a whole Gyarados.
We're right now, we're Naruto in Naruto Shippuden.
Pre-training
right?
exam.
Base mode, base Naruto. After these next 2 weeks, we're going to come back as Sage Mode Naruto. Like, shit's going to be crazy. We're going to go toe-to-toe with Pain. Oh, my goodness. Anyways, I love that transition, dude. I love when... Dude, there's this one scene where Shikaku, Shikamaru's dad's like, oh, shit, if he's Sage Mode, he's in a whole different ballgame now. He's a whole different tier of power. Let's not even go near them. We're just going to get in his way. Dude, that was so cool. Anyways, we're going to be Sage Mode Naruto next time you hear us talk in like 2 or 3 weeks. So, as always, remember to have fun, be safe, and to keep those bellies full. I just realized I don't usually say that in the podcast, do I? I usually just kind of say bye. Anyways, thanks for coming. Maybe I should be. I haven't been. No, I always just say bye, and you say bye, and then that's it. So I'm going to... No, it's okay. It's okay. It's not you. As always, remember to have fun, be safe, and to keep those bellies full.
Bye.
Bye.